Now, just before we go and start creating our background, let me just show you something about the background. Now, we created our flowers on the white of the slide. That was more neutral. And here's why I didn't do it directly on the background. When I create objects, like say the sunflowers, I'm going to be using them over and over again. I'm not going to create this once and never use it again. Now, if you're creating a project where you're only going to use it once, then you'd probably want to design the background and apply the elements to the background so make sure they all work. But I know I'm going to be using this over and over again. So let me just show you how the background influences the colors of the objects themselves. So let's go to Picture Tools, Format. Let's go to Corrections. Let's say I had originally wanted this on a dark background. So I have a nice dark background. And if I would have built the sunflowers on the dark background, I probably would have made them a lot lighter to match the dark background. Now let's say I have another project where I want to use the sunflowers, and this time they're going to be on a light background. Well, now the sunflowers would have been too light, and I'd have to make them all darker. So it becomes a lot more complicated to take your objects and make them darker or lighter to the background, when it's a lot easier to create them on a neutral background like the white of the slide and adjust the background to the light or darkness you need for your objects. So again, this is why I created them on the white, and then we're going to do the background. I intend to use these a lot more. It's not a one-off thing. Now, if you're just doing a one-off thing again, then you could adjust it all to the background. But here, I use my objects over and over again for different projects. Okay, so we're going to be creating something very similar to this right here. And we're actually going to build a little shelf at the bottom here. I'm going to put a little shelf because I want my vase sitting on the shelf. I don't want my vase kind of just floating on a background. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so we're going to just grab a rectangle, something like this. And of course, it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing it to the whole slide, then you adjust it to the whole slide. I'm going to send that to the back. Don't need the outline. Get rid of the outline. And I'm going to apply a couple of colors to it. Let's go to gradient. You get your default gradient. I only need two colors, so I got these two here. What I'm going to do is go to a brown. So I'm going to take this one, let's see, and click on my color stop here. Use a brown that we already used, a nice brown like that. I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to more colors, and I'm going to go to my standard, and I think I'm going to use something maybe a little more on the yellow side, like this, maybe that one there. Okay, I'm going to say okay. Now that's a little too yellow, so what I'm going to do is brighten this up. So I'm going to take this maybe to about a 50. And I think I'm going to take the dark a little bit down. Maybe I'll take that down to maybe about, like I say, 20, 25, somewhere around there. And I'm going to rotate that. I want the dark part to be more along the left and the outside here. So I want the light part to be here. So something, let's say, about like that. Maybe a little more. Okay, I think it looks pretty good. Okay, so I've got that. Now what I'm going to do is copy that, and I'm going to introduce the color to the PNG. I'm going to use picture effects on this. So you can see this looks pretty good because we have a lot of yellow in the flowers, so this works pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to just move that out of here. I'm going to go to Paste, Paste Special, PNG. Okay, I'm going to put that there. Send to back. So what I'm going to do now is go to Picture Tools, Format, and now we're going to apply a little texture first. I don't want a smooth background. I want a bit of a texture. So I'm going to go to Artistic Effects, and I'm going to use this one right here. This is a nice little texturizer, and I'm going to click that. You can see that. It gives us a nice impression of a wall. It's kind of like a textured wall. I'm not even going to bother playing with the options. I think I'm happy with that. That looks perfect. Now I'm going to go to my color. And I think I'm going to just make it a little more red. Take a look at that. So we add a little more red to it. So we get something kind of like that. So that looks pretty good. A little too dark for me. So I want to lighten it up. So I'm going to go to my corrections. And I'm going to play some of these. Let's say, oh, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. So something here. Now it's up to you, of course, what you want. So I think I'm going to stick to either this one here or maybe this one. So this one kind of removes a little bit of the brown color, gives us this kind of red tint. This one kind of softens that a bit. So what do you think looks good? I think I'm going to dull the color. I don't want the background fighting with the flowers. So I think something like this looks pretty good. So I'm going to choose that one, and there, we got that. I'm pretty happy with that. It looks pretty good. So we're going to have the sun coming in from this side right here. Okay, so it's going to be brighter on this side, a little darker on that side. Okay, now I want to build a shelf because I don't want my vase just floating in the air. So I'm going to grab a rectangle and just draw a little rectangle here. Of course, we don't need the outline. And I'm going to just go to my picture or texture fields right here. And I'm going to go to my textures. I'm going to just use a nice wood grain fill, something like this one here. That looks pretty good. Now, I want these grains to be closer together because we're seeing this kind of like on an angle because it's on a shelf. So right here, I'm going to go to my scale. I think I'll make them about 50%. That makes the grain much smaller. Gives you more of an impression that you're kind of seeing at an angle. And I think I'd like to brighten this up. So I'm going to go to my picture format. And remember, this is still a picture. Even though we got it this way, it's still a picture, so we can use the picture tools. So let's say color-wise, I might want to make it a little more red. That looks a little brighter. And let's go here and let's make this a little brighter. Let's see, what should we try? Something like that? No, something like that. Now let's go down. There we go. Something like that. So you can see what we're doing here. We're trying to make it a little brighter because it's a nice bright wood. And we do have a nice sunny color on it. So we'll take that. I want to see the edge of our little shelf here. So this kind of looks like the edge of the shelf, but I want to make it a little darker. So I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to just make that a little bit smaller like this. And I'm going to just put it on top. And I'm going to just go to my format corrections. I'm going to make that a little bit darker. That's a little too dark. So something like that looks pretty good. So you get the idea what I'm doing. I think that looks pretty good right here. I like that one. So it looks like we're looking at the edge of the shelf, or it could be a table. So the vase sits on this, and that will look a little more realistic because we have a nice edge. Okay, that part is done. So we got our background. We got a nice little shelf here built. And now we got to create the vase. Okay, so now I'm going to select my little shelf here. I'm going to group them. And I want to add some shadows here. So I want a shadow coming at an angle because the light's coming this way. So I want it to kind of go like the light is coming up this way. So I'm going to grab a nice trapezoid shape, draw that, just rotate it. Kind of put it like this and kind of drag it out to the edge. Obviously we don't need a line. Something like that. I think I'll just use the color we have here. I'm going to select that color and grab the format painter, apply it there. Good. We need the dark. We don't need the light. Now I want to go from a dark to dark because I don't want the light color to influence it. So I'm going to click here, get rid of the light tab, put that there, and make that transparency kind of like this. About maybe 80, 90 degree. So we have light to dark, just the way it would be. So that looks pretty good to me. You would normally be able to see the texture through the shadow. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take that, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it as a PNG. Okay, so we're going to give it our texture again. So we'll just do to the box here. We'll click here, we'll just do a nice texture. Let's go to that one. Let's put this one here. Let's bring the shelf to the front so you can see better. Okay, that looks better. Now what I like to do is maybe add a little color to it. So let's go to color, maybe a little redder, something like that. That looks pretty good. I think I like that. Maybe let's go to corrections. Maybe we can brighten it. Maybe something like that. That looks pretty good. I think I like that. Now what I'm going to do is go to my effects. I'm going to put a nice soft edge. So it's a nice soft shadow. So let's see. Let's try maybe 2.5. That looks pretty good. So we have a nice soft shadow. Where the shelf would be touching the wall, it would be kind of the same thing. There would be a bit of a shadow here. So what I'm going to do is just drag a rectangle, I think. I'll just take a nice little rectangle, kind of like that. And again, or I'm going to just, I'll take this one here. Might as well use that one. Format, apply it here. I'm just going to rotate the fill here. So it kind of goes that way. So it kind of goes dark to light like that. That looks pretty good. Now I could do the trapezoid shape, but I think that looks pretty good. And I kind of like that. Now I have to bring this, my shelf, to the front. So it's on top. And I think that looks pretty good. So it kind of looks like the shelf is touching. There's a bit of a shadow. And I think what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to click the dark stop, make it a little more color. I'm going to actually use this dark red. And I'm going to just take the slider, make it a little bit darker, a little more to the red. That looks pretty good. And maybe I'll take the transparency up a bit, kind of like that. And then I'm going to just maybe take that down just a little bit, just enough so it looks like we got something happening there. Let's say maybe 2.5, bit of an edge there. Looks like the shelf is touching, the light is coming through there. That looks pretty good. Okay, we don't need this and we don't need this. Let's get rid of it. Okay, now we're going to do our vase. Now you might think the vase would be the most complex thing to do here, But the vase is actually the easiest thing you're going to do. It is the simplest component to create. So let's go use a shape. The best shape to create a vase is actually a wave shape. So we're going to rotate it. Okay, now if you take a look at the edge here, what do you have? You have a very nice vase edge right here. So we're going to take that, we're going to duplicate it, and all we have to do, rotate, flip horizontally, put them together, and what do you have? You have a vase. Very important that you align the tops up perfectly. So I'm going to go to line, align the top. They got to be perfect. Now you actually have two vase shapes. You have this nice wide one, but you also have a nice elegant, kind of like a tall Italian vase right here. I'm going to just show you that by changing the color. Okay, so you have this vase and you have that vase. So you actually have two vases, depending on what you want. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it a couple more times. So we're going to show you how to alter the vase. Okay, let's take this one and let's go to Format, Merge, we'll do a Subtract, and we have the thin one. Now don't worry about the line, just get rid of the outline. Now what happens sometimes is when you do stuff like this, you get a little extra space because of that line there. So I wouldn't want that extra space, so I would just take something like a rectangle and I would just move it right to the edge like this, click on this, click on that, and subtract it again. Sometimes you get a little extra space, you can just cut that space out. Okay, now this one here, I'll just take that and I'll go to my merge, do a union, and we have that. So we have a wider vase. Now this one here, we're going to make it a little more curved. And that's with the shape handle. So we grab the shape handle at the top, drag that way, take this one, drag the other way. Okay, now you got a gap in here, not a problem. Just got to fill the gap. Use anything you want, rectangle, freeform shape, whatever. Okay, and I might just move this one out just a little bit so it's a little wider. Okay, so what do you think of that? So we got that. We're going to go to Format, and we do a union. There you go, 3 vases. So nice tall elegant one, a wider one, and more of a nice little curved one right here. Okay, now that's not the only shape you could use. We could go to the double wave shape, do the same thing. So here's our double wave. We just rotate it and duplicate it. Do the same thing, Format, rotate, flip horizontal. Okay, you want to align the tops always to the top. Line the tops up, line top, make sure they're perfect. Now again, I'm going to show you that you have the same thing. I'm going to go here and you have a very elegant one, tall one, or you have a wider one. So I might take this in just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to take this and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate it twice. Let's take that and let's do merge. We'll do subtract. You have a very thin one. Again, get rid of the outline. Take this one and we do merge shape. We'll do union and you have a wider one. And then we'll do this one here. We'll take the shape handle so it's a little more curvy like that. And just make sure that there's no gap. I'll just move closer together like that. Take this one, go to merge shape and do union. Okay, so there it is. With basically 2 different shapes, you've got 6 different vases. And again, you can still stretch these out taller, wider, whatever you like. So the one we're going to use is this one here, just a very plain one. So I'm going to use that one because we have a lot of sunflowers to put in there. We don't want to use a thin one like this. Obviously, they would naturally not be able to fit all the stems into this. So you'd have to have a vase that had a much wider mouth on it. Okay, so let's go to this. And we're going to get rid of these. Now the next thing is the base. We have to have a base. We can't have it flat. A vase sitting on a shelf or anything is not flat. There's going to be definite roundness to it at the bottom. So it's got to look circular. Which shape works best? There's actually only one shape that's going to work best for this. We have to go to our flow chart and we're going to take this one. Stored data. Okay. This is one of those things you have to play with when you work with the shapes. You'd be surprised which shape actually works for what you need. Okay, so we have this and I'm going to show how it works. So we're going to take this, bring it in. I'll just take it down a bit. And if I put them together, you can see that. That's kind of how it works. Now let me get rid of the outline so you can see it better. And there's your base. Now you can have it bigger, smaller, whatever you like. It's very important, obviously, that this fits perfectly in the center. So I'm going to select these 2 here, go to Format. I'm going to say line, center, line, middle. Just make sure there's smack dab in the middle and drag it down. Take this, move it down. I'm using my arrow keys, move down, and there you go. So I got a nice big base. And I am going to be using this for something else. So I'm going to move that over here. Okay, now we just take that and we go to merge, do union, and we have that. Okay, so how big do I want this vase? Maybe something like that. Make it a little wider, so kind of like that. Okay, so we'll start up with that. We can always stretch it wider if we need to make it bigger. So a wide vase like that. We got a lot of sunflowers to put in there, so they naturally they'd have to get through the wide mouth. So something like that looks pretty good. Okay, so let's give it a color. If you were to buy a vase in a flower shop, they would be a very neutral color. Either they're like clear, like glass vase or crystal vase, or they'd be something like a green vase, or maybe you might find a solid vase that was beige or something, but they'd be a very neutral color. So we're going to make this just a hint of a green vase. We're going to make it a green vase. Okay, now the next step is this. Do you want to change the vase color? Are you sure when you pick a color, that's the color you want? What about if you want to change it? So if you want to change the vase color, you should do this a very specific way. Now, if you don't really care, you're going to just apply color, and that's fine, then it doesn't matter. But if you think you might want to change the vase color, then when you apply your gradients, you want to stick to your theme color gradients. So I'm going to do that to this one, so I'm going to show you what that means. So I'm going to go to gradient. So you get your default colors, okay? Now what I want is light to dark. I'm going to spin this around. So actually, I'm going to spin this. So I want to go this way, light to dark. So I got 90 degrees. But what I actually want is I want the light to be on this side, because that's where the light's coming from. So I actually want the light to be on this side. So you can see that we have the dark there. Now I want to add one more stop because I actually want 3 colors. Okay, so I'm going to take this one, and this is going to be the light stop. I'm going to stick to my theme color, so in case I want to change the color of the vase, I can actually do that. Okay, so that goes to the light, so we'll take the light stop. This one's going to go to the middle, so we're going to take this brighter green here. And then this will be the dark green down at the bottom, like that. Okay, and I'm going to just bring the light color up a bit, just a little bit like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now what we have to do is we have to add our reflections. Okay, now just to show you what I'm talking about changing colors, so I'm going to go to Format, go to my Design, go to my Colors, and I can change my colors very, very quickly in all this. So you can see how that works. Once you get the reflections and everything, it'll look even more realistic. Okay, so anyways, that's the idea about changing your theme colors. So if you think you want to change your colors of your vase, then you want to stick to your theme colors. And that means you can't actually click in between here. Those aren't theme colors. The theme colors are strictly what is on the theme. So if you want to make your stops lighter or darker, you have to use here. You can't go here and go into more colors. None of these colors are part of the theme colors. Okay, so I'm going to try to stick to my theme color. So I need a reflection here. So what shape am I going to use? Well, obviously the wave shape, because that's what I've used. Okay. Now you could do it this way. You can just put it like this. You can see it works in there pretty good. I always like to have my wave a little more dramatic. So something like this, and you kind of know how we like to do ours. We like to do it like this. So I'm going to do that. Okay. We still get the kind of a flow of the wave in there. Looks pretty good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take this color, we're going to Format, apply it to there. So what I want is the white, and I want the white on this side. So I think what I'm going to do is just flip these around. I don't need the dark color. Now I'm going to take this stop, I'm going to make it a light color too, and I'm going to make that one transparent. So we get a reflection that looks like that. There you go. And you can rotate this. The reflection gives it a nice little bulge here. I don't need to go right to the edge like this. That's not necessary. A little bit of dark in there is just fine. It's going to be just fine. So it gives us a little more dimension to the vase, makes it look like it's a little more rounded. Okay, now I'm going to take this. I'm going to flip that, rotate, flip horizontal, and just kind of do that. Okay, so we have something like that again. And maybe I'll take this one. I might even make it a white, make it even lighter. So maybe make it white so it just shows up a little bit better. Okay, so you can see how we get the nice bulge in here by the reflections. The next step is the top part. We're actually not going to see the top part because the flowers are going on the top. But let's say you just wanted to create a bunch of vases and you didn't put anything in them, or maybe just one flower with one stem that came out, so they would see the top part. So let me show you this. I'm going to take this and I'm going to make a duplicate. And what I'm going to do is just keep the top. So I need to keep these. I'm going to put this aside. I need that for later on. And we're going to always use this particular shape to cut everything because we have that nice curve. Okay, so I want the top. I'm going to bring it to the front. Okay, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to stretch it out. Go all the way down to the bottom. Now, depending on the curve, if I want a deep curve, I would stretch it down. If I want to keep this curve, I create a couple of these. But this is good enough. Okay, so I think that's good enough. So I want to keep the top part. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this. Go to merge. Say subtract. I'm going to put this on top. Line them up. And I only need 2 colors. I don't want the dark color again. So I've got a dark green to light green. Okay, something like this. And this time I want the light color. So I'm going to spin it up like this. And I'm going to make the green transparent. Okay, and when you do that, bring it in a bit, you get this. So you get a very, very light top. But have you ever seen glass vase or frosted glass vases? They're very much like that. When you get to the top, they're a little thinner at the top, so they're almost a little more see-through, so they're a little bit lighter. Now you notice this dark green that we have here? I didn't make this one a light green like that because I want that dark green there to influence, and it helps with the idea of the bend. It gives it the idea that there's a bend in there. So that looks pretty good. Now again, we're not going to really see that, but if you actually have to create, let's say, a plain vase, it gives you a very strong feeling of the light coming to the top here. Once again, let me show you how we could change the colors again. So if we go to our design, go to our colors, and just run through here, you'll see how everything changes, including the reflections. Okay, so you kind of get the idea. Okay, so again, if you stick to your theme colors, that's what's going to happen. Okay, so next thing is, how about this part here? I want this part here to be a little bit lighter. Let me show you how to do that. We're going to take this. Okay, now again, I'm going to borrow this. I want this part right here. So I'm going to take this. I actually want 2 of them. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to stretch that out. I don't need the bottom. I'm going to take this, stretch it out. I want this part right here. I'm going to take this, this, and this, and I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to go to Home, Format. I'm going to do a subtract. And again, don't need the dark, so I'm going to get rid of the dark. I want something like this. I'm going to rotate it. Bring the light to the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to put that in here. We're going to make the green transparent. And we have something like that. We'll take the green, the darker green in a bit. And we get something that looks kind of like this. This is kind of what I want. It's lighter at the bottom. It gives a strong sense of light coming to this vase. So that's what we want. You can take it in, you can take it back. You can do it like that. And again, I want the dark green because the dark green does add to the idea of the roundness. So that looks pretty good. Now the next thing we got to do is our little base here at the bottom. So we got this. Now I stretched it out, so I'm going to see if I can match it again. Just drag this like this. Down. Okay, it looks close enough. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to duplicate it like that. I'm going to just make sure it's right. So I'm going to just look at the colors and take it down a bit. Okay, so we're going to take that and we're going to go to merge and we're going to say subtract, and this is going to be our base. So we're going to add it right here and we have a base. I'm going to take my vase color. That's good enough. I'm going to go to my home, format, click that. Now all I'm going to do here is just take the light stop, drag it over, and just start spinning it around. I'm trying to make it look three-dimensional, so that doesn't look too bad. So I'm trying to make it look three-dimensional. It's still going to be kind of rounded. So basically I'm going to just rotate this until I think it looks pretty good. So that looks pretty good too. I think I like that one. So it's a little darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. Of course, this would be reflecting a little bit on the edge. And I think that looks pretty good. Now I can stretch a little bit bigger if I want a little bit wider base or something. So I can do that. The dark part here is okay. That looks pretty good. We're going to select this and now we're going to group it. Okay, so again, if you want to change your colors, you would go to Design, Colors, and you just run your colors and everything changes. A whole bunch of different colors. Now, at this point, what we have is a solid vase. So once we have it here, we have basically a solid vase. Now what I actually want to create is a transparent vase. I want you to be able to see through this. So how do we do that? It's very simple. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow this stem. I'm going to take this stem. I'm going to just drag it. Keep my control button down so I have a copy. I just want the bottom of the stem. I don't need the top part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste this as a PNG first. So I'm going to copy that. Paste special PNG. So I have that. I'm going to go to that one. So again, this is just a PNG file. So it's got all the nice colors and everything in it. I'm going to cut the top part off. I don't really need the top part. So maybe I'll just use my nice rounded thing here. It doesn't really matter how it looks at the top. You're cutting it off. So I'm just going to cut it like that. So we have this. So I'm going to take this. And I'm going to go to Format. And I'm going to say Subtract. Okay. So there's your stem. Maybe I'll just make it a little bit thinner. For whatever reason, sometimes you get these big empty spaces, and we obviously don't want it. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, go right here. I'm going to take my stem, grab the rectangle, go to Format, Merge Shape, Subtract, and we just have that. That's perfect. So it looks pretty good. I might make it just a little bit thinner. We're going to put about 5 or 6 stems in here, so I'm going to just kind of rotate them. Already you can see that it looks transparent, but we're going to do more. So I'm going to just kind of put them like that. Take some of these, Format, rotate, flip horizontally. You can have them coming in different angles. Now I'm not going to try to make as many stems as there actually we're going to make. I just want stems in there. Nobody's going to really count how many stems there actually is in there. Okay, so we got something kind of looks like that. So it looks a little bit realistic. Okay, so you actually want to make them look like they're actually coming into the vase. So you don't want it coming too close to the edge. Kind of like that. Okay, so we take all that. And what we're going to do, just for now, we're going to group them. And I'm going to copy and paste them as a PNG. So I'm going to copy those. Paste, paste special, PNG. Okay. Let's put this to the side. Now what I'm going to do with these is just actually blur them. So what I'm going to do is go to Artistic Effect right here. And there actually is a blur. And all we have to do is that. Okay. You can take the blur down if you want a little sharper, but I don't think that's quite necessary. Now this is what it does by just doing a simple little blur on these stems. Okay. Now if I take this and I put it over here, what it looks like is you're looking through a frosted glass. So now we have something that looks more transparent. So it looks like you're looking through a fairly frosted glass. You could do more. I'm going to just take that. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste that. Okay. Now, let's say I wanted something to look like a really frosted glass. Okay, I'm going to go to Artistic, and we're actually going to use this one called Photocopy. And I'm going to take the detail down, and that gives you kind of a true frosted glass. Now we'd go up here, go to Color, add just a little bit of color to it, and then we'd go to Corrections and maybe make it a little bit darker. Something like that. And then you'd have a frosted glass. Bring that to the front. And you have something that looks quite nice like a true frosted glass. Now that's one way. You can copy that. Paste special, PNG. And what you can do is go to Artistic and use a glow diffuse. Do that. Take the intensity down. And you take the transparency up. And that will also give you a frosted glass appearance. Bring to front. Put that in there. And you can see it's this the stems that really make it look realistic. So now you have another frosted glass. Okay, and again, you could take the vase to match the yellow background. You want to change the color a bit. You might want to make it a little more on the yellow side to match the background. And again, you could go to your corrections. If you want to make it really light, the light is really shining through. You can make it a little darker like that. So again, you have a lot of variety on this too, depending on how intense you want the light coming through that. Okay, so that's another way of doing it. Now what we're going to actually do, I'm going to get rid of that one, is we're going to put the glass effect on this. Okay, now it's time to take advantage of the actual glass effect. It's part of the picture tool. So let's do that. Let's copy that. Let's paste special. And we have that. Let's go to our effects here, artistic effects. Let's go put a glass. There it is. You got a nice glass effect. Let's take the transparency down, maybe around 40, 45, so it's not as strong. But you have these black edges to deal with. Okay, so we have to deal with that. Now, I do want this to be transparent. That means I want you to see the stems through. So you might say, why don't you just do that at the beginning? Why don't you just take this, select both of them, copy them, paste special, and apply a glass effect to that. Okay, which you can do. The only problem is I want to be able to control the stems separately. Now I won't be able to do that. I'm going to be putting color on this and lightening them up, and they're all going to work together. Now what I want to do is be able to control the stems. I might want to make the stems a little darker so you can see them, or a little lighter so you can see them. I won't be able to do that here because they're all one object. So we're going to actually do the stems as a separate object. Okay, now before we get to that, let's fix this problem. How are we going to get rid of this? Well, there's no direct way to do that, but what we can do is use this as a fill into another shape. So what shape would we use? The actual vase shape. So I'm going to click on my vase. Remember, it's grouped. I'm going to hit the tab key, and you can see I've got the vase shape itself. I'm going to copy and paste. Okay, so now we're going to use this as a fill into here, but you have kind of a problem. You'll notice the handles aren't pointing in the same direction. So your handles here on the picture, we have the handle pointing to the top. Here, we have the handle pointing to the left. They're not going to line up. I'm going to just show you what I mean. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to click here, go to my fill, go to my picture texture, and you can see that they didn't line up. Okay, so the handles aren't lining up, so this is not going to line up. One way around that is to uncheck this and say rotate, and then it lines up. Now you can't rotate this. If you try to rotate it, it's not going to rotate. Okay, so you got a problem. Now you could do it that way, select it, copy and paste it as a PNG, and it'll be perfect. But that's going to produce a little bit of problems later on. So here's a better way to do this. So what we're going to do is we're not going to rotate it. Okay, we can leave it like that. And if your handles are pointing in one of the four directions, like say top, right, bottom, or left, and that's what's happening here. This one's going to the left, this one's going to the top. Then an easy solution is this. You take the picture, and that's this thing here, it's going to fill it. You take this, and you rotate it to the opposite. Kind of like that, okay? So when you rotate it to the opposite, like this, you can just copy that, and it will actually fit perfectly in there. Now, I'm not sure why that happens, but it does happen. Now, if it doesn't work that way, then you can rotate it the other way to the same side and see if that works. But that only works when your handles are pointing on the four directions, top, bottom, left, or right, okay? If not, then you can just uncheck the rotation, get it, line it up, and copy and paste it back again. Okay, so we got that. We don't need this one. So how do we fix this? That's pretty easy. We're going to play with this, okay? We're going to play with the offsets. So what the offset means is it stretches the picture to fill the shape. Remember, the handle is always the top. So this is actually technically the top. This is the bottom. That's the left. That's the right. So remember, we're dealing with the shape, and that's a shape's handle. So this is the top. So in the top, you have to spin down. All the stuff you have to spin down. Everything's spinning down. So the top, I'm going to spin down. That stretches it to fill the top. Okay, now the bottom, spin down. We stretch it to fill the bottom until you get rid of all little spot. Now, I actually don't want solid stems. I want this nice soft stems. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it. Going back to the PNG. Now, that doesn't look natural because it should be pebble grains, so we need to go to artistic, put the glass effect in that, and we have something like that. So that looks a little better. Now we have two separate things that we can control. Let's take this, and let's move it to our little table here. Let's start off with the vase, and let's go, let's say, format, color. I'd like to bring it a little more into the yellow, the brighter yellow kind of red area, so we got that. Okay, so the vase looks a little more natural because it should be picking up the color of the background. And then we can go back, either lighten it up, darken it up, and just work your way through here. What do you think? You know, as you work through here, you can add more light to it, less light through it. And basically this is what you're doing. What do you think looks good? So you just kind of go through, and what do you think? So I think this one looks pretty good. So I'll do that. So we got a very nice light glass vase. Light looks like it's shining through pretty good. Now we can take care of our little stems here and decide the same thing there. So I'm going to go to my color. I'm going to make more of the warmer tones in there like that. What I'm going to do now is take a look. Do I want to make them darker, lighter? So you can see what I'm doing. So by having these separate, I have better control of how these things are going to work. And I kind of think something like this on the darker side looks better, where they're still in there. You can still see the texture, but they're not that obvious. I think I might do something maybe along this line. So we got these nice dark stems in there, and it looks pretty transparent. Let's take this, let's take that. We're going to group them. Now we bring this to the front. We have to obviously work with our flowers, but let me just bring it to the front. And you're going to kind of get the idea of what we're doing here. So, okay, so we have our glass vase done now. And we have our base here. We have a background. Now the next thing, of course, is to put it all together. And then once we get all the flowers in there, then we have to put a little bit of shadows here and there, and the project will be completed. Okay, I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all my background elements and group them so I don't accidentally move them around. There we go. Okay, next thing to talk about is what we call the stacking order. Now we're obviously going to be creating more of these flowers just by copying them and more leaves and making an arrangement with them. That means we have to control where their position is. Certain things will be in front of other things, certain things will be behind other things. So we don't want to have to use the menu or right click on a certain thing and say send backwards, send forward, because that gets to be too complex and too slow. Fortunately, PowerPoint has something called a selection panel that allows you to see the stacking order of things and allows you to move them wherever you want. So let's do that. So I'm going to just select something first, go to my drawing tools format, and there's the selection pane. And it's right here. Now, this is going to be a little confusing the very first time you use it. Now, what happens is when you group things, PowerPoint shows you all the individual elements in those groups. And there's a lot. Like when you made our sunflower, you can imagine how many individual elements are in the sunflower. So they're all going to be shown here. Now, we do not want to see all these things. All we want to see is the actual main group. So what we have to do is we have to collapse all this. Right now, this is open. The arrow's pointing downwards. It means it's open. So all we do is we just click on the groups and we collapse them. Every time you open a PowerPoint slide and you get the selection panel, for some reason, it always shows you them. So it always opens them up. So the first thing you have to do is just collapse everything. Now that when you collapse links, it doesn't look that bad. Okay, so text box, you can obviously see that's what that is. So what are these things? If I don't know what they are, I just give them a click. And, well, that one is the background. I can see that right there. The next thing is, obviously, group 2, group 3, a group 1159, a group 1158, that doesn't mean anything to you. So fortunately, you can rename these things so you know exactly what they are. So group 9 is the background. So why don't I just double click and just call it that. I'm going to go through each one of these things and naming what they are so I know what they are. Let's start at the top here. Let's go to group 2. Well, that's the profile. So let's double click. We'll call it profile 1. Now, what's this one? Well, that's the full sunflower. So let's double click. We'll call it sunflower 1. Let's click on this one. Let's see what that is. That's the leaf. So we'll call that leaf 1. Let's click on this one. That's the bud. So let's call that bud 1. Let's click on this one. That's the stem. So we'll call that stem 1. Let's click on that one. That is the folded leaf, so we'll just call it folded. Folded 1. And let's click on this. And what's that? Well, that's our vase. So let's call that vase. And there it is. So now we have all our elements and their names, so we know exactly what they are. And now we're going to talk about their stacking order. Where is their position in the stacking order? Now this is how it works. What you see on top is on top of everything. So profile 1, which is this, is on top of everything. The background that you see here is at the bottom. That means it is below everything. So everything sits on top of it. And that's basically how it works. Now what we're going to be doing is moving things up and down the stacking order. And that's just a matter of, say, clicking on something and using either the arrow keys or dragging. So you could use these arrow keys to change the stacking order. So I can drop it down like this, or I could just put my mouse on it and drag it up or down. Okay, so right now this won't make much difference because we haven't started to build our composition. What we have to do is create more of these elements. That means copying more of these sunflowers in the profile and making more of them before we put them together. So let's do that. Let's make more of these. And then, of course, we're going to give each one of them a name so you know exactly what they are. Then we're going to put them in the vase. And then we'll have control as to their positioning, what's in front, what's in back, and we'll easily be able to move things backwards and forwards. So let's create some extra flowers here. Okay, so let's get our vase on the background. That's what's going to start things, so we put it there. Let's look at our selection panel, and you can see the vase is above the background. That's where it has to be. Now, if we were to put the vase below the background, it'll be behind it. Now, this is, again, one of the advantages of the selection pane. So let's say you did actually bring something to the front, something large, like the background, and you have something smaller behind it. How are you going to get it? Well, you could try using your selection handles like this and do that, but that tends to be awkward, especially if you have a lot of elements behind this. So this is where the selection pane comes in handy. My vase is at the bottom. That's not good. So I just click on it and I just drag it up. Now it's fixed. So again, another advantage of the selection pane. Okay, so we need to make a lot more flowers here. So we're going to have 2 big sunflowers. We're going to have 3 of these profiles, and I think 3 buds. And then, of course, we'll create as many leaves as necessary to fill in all the gaps. Okay, so we have one here. Let's just drag another one out. Okay, so you can see it takes the same name as that group. So it was called Sunflower 1. So you can see this one is now Sunflower 1. The one we just created is on top. That's not good, so we have to rename it Sunflower 2. Just that simple. Let's put these together. So I'm going to take this one, put it maybe here, and I'm going to take this one and drag it here so it goes behind. Okay, something like kind of like that. I think it looks pretty good. Now we have to create the other flowers. So let's start off with the profile. So we're going to duplicate this. So we're going to just drag. We're going to drag a stem. So we have that. And then we just put them together. Okay, so this one is behind the stem. We'll just quickly bring to front and just put it in there. Maybe I'll rotate it a bit. Kind of like that. That looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to select both of them. Do Control G. And that one's done. So what's it called? A group 13. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. So what we have to do is we're going to call that Profile 2. Okay, that one's done. Let's put it aside. We need another one. So let's take that. We're going to duplicate it. We're going to duplicate the stem. Maybe I'll flip this one the other way. So I'll go Format, Rotate, Flip Horizontal. Do that with the stem. Rotate, Flip Horizontal. So let's see what we can do with this. Okay, let's say bring that to the front. Now maybe I'm going to take this and point it more down. Kind of like that. We don't want them all pointing the same way. And I think what I might do is flatten the seed head a bit. So it's not exactly the same as the other one. Kind of like that a bit. Move the center part a bit. Kind of like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, so we'll select both of these. We'll group those. So what's it called? Group 14. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing. So that's Profile. And we're going to call that Profile 3. And that one's done. We have one more to do. So let's take that one. I might as well just use that one, but I have to duplicate the stem because I'm going to need it again. And let's take that and maybe we'll point this one up more. Kind of like that. Okay, and let's bring that one to the front. And we'll just kind of do it like this. So it's pointing a little bit up. We have 3 sunflowers, not exactly pointing the same way because we don't want that. You want to make it look a little more natural. That looks pretty good to me. And we're going to group them. Okay, so what is it called? Group 15. Doesn't mean anything. That is Profile 4. So those 3 are done. Let's start off with this one. Okay, so let's maybe put this here. Now, Profile 1 is at the top of the list, so it's in front of everything. Well, it has to be behind. Now, before I do that, I should make sure that my stems kind of match. Okay, I'm looking and I notice that the stems here are a little bit bigger than this. So what I'm going to do is just stretch my vase out a little wider so the stems are a little bit wider. because these stems should match the thickness of the stems in the vase. Yeah, I think it looks pretty good. Okay, I think it looks pretty good. I like that. So let's take this. Now this should go behind this sunflower right here. So what is that? That's sunflower 1. So this should go behind sunflower 1. So let's do that. Okay, that's profile 4. Drag it behind sunflower 1. And now it's at the back. Okay, we can maybe rotate this a bit. And we have something like that. Now make sure that these are actually look like they're going into the vase. You don't want them going in such a funny angle that they'd be kind of awkward. So you want to make sure they look like they're going into the vase. Okay, it looks pretty good. And you can see that. See, it's how it's pointing through. That might be a problem later on. Maybe we should be putting this behind the vase. Drag it down behind the vase. Okay, let's drag it down behind the vase. And now it's not that bad of a problem. Okay, looks pretty good. Now let's say this one. Okay, that's profile 3. That should go probably behind the vase too. So let me just take that, drag it behind the vase to the bottom. Let me just kind of point it downwards, and we're going to have that kind of going down like this. That looks pretty good. And then we have one more. Let's take this, and we can just put it somewhere back there. So that one can go behind, well, it can actually go behind the vase too. Well, let's put it behind sunflower here. Let's put it behind sunflower 1. So we got our nice 3 profiles in there. They look pretty good. They're branching out quite nicely. So kind of like that. That looks pretty good. I'm kind of happy with that. Now you could also make them a little bit smaller if you want, just for a little bit of variety, but I think it looks pretty good. Now we have to do our buds. We're going to take that bud, we're going to duplicate it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the buds a bit because I don't want them all the same. I want some of the buds that look like the petals are already starting to open. So I'm going to ungroup that. I'm going to have to do that a couple of times. I'm going to ungroup. I want to get petals. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to click one of these and I'm going to just kind of stretch it out. So kind of doing something like this. So you can see what's happening. It looks like it's starting to expand. Maybe I'll take the other ones back here and just kind of expand them just a little bit and put these back. And again, notice when you rotate things, like take a look at the shadow down here. The shadow down here is actually coming off. It's supposed to be going up. So keep in mind that when you rotate things, the shadows don't rotate. So I got to fix that one. I got to send it back. That looks better. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to group it. Now we need to make a copy of the stem. Let's put this in front, bring to front. And we have a nice little bud. Maybe you can rotate it a bit. Okay, that looks pretty good. So it looks like a nice expanding sunflower. Okay, let's grab that. Let's group that. And what should we call that? Well, that's going to be bud 2. Okay, that one's done. Let's take another bud. Let's duplicate it. And again, I'm going to ungroup that. I'm going to click on the petals and ungroup the petals. Maybe I'll just stretch them up a bit, like kind of like that. So that looks like they're kind of opening up like that. That looks pretty good too. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to group that. I'm going to take a copy of the stem and let's see, how should we do this? We could have it more down. We could have it more up. We could have it kind of like that. Let's bring it to the front. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's select both of those. Let's group that. Group 19 is what it's called. What does that mean? Nothing. So what is that? That is going to be bud 3. Excellent. So that's that one. And I think this one will just leave the same. So we don't need to make a duplicate. Let's bring that to the front. And I can see that we have a shadow going the wrong way. So I'm going to click in the bottom bracket there. We got to fix that. We have to make sure that goes up. There we go. Looks pretty good. Now let's put that here. Looks kind of nice. Let's group that. Okay, so what is this one called? Group 20. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing. Bud 4. And there it is. Now you can see how nicely condensed. Once you condense your groups down like this, it's not as complicated as it really looks. It's really well organized. Very nicely organized. Okay, so let's work with these guys. So we should probably have something facing the other way. So maybe I'll take that, Format, rotate, flip horizontally. And again, now you can see the shadows have kind of changed again. You just got to be aware of that. So you got to change the direction of the shadows. Now, if you really don't want to bother with that, what you can do, of course, is you can copy and paste this as a PNG. So if I were to take something like this, and I wanted that as a PNG because I want to rotate it and I didn't want to bother with the shadows and all that, I could copy that. I could paste it as a PNG. It will look exactly the same, but when you flip it, the shadows aren't going to change. Now you do have an advantage. One little advantage if you make things PNG is you have the picture tools to work with. So under color, I could make this a little more red if I wanted to. So you can see that compared to that. The only problem with the PNG is I found that when you apply the PNG to the petals, I didn't find them to be as realistic or as natural as just the vectors. So that's why I never did it. But you can certainly do that yourself. And then you have, you can still work with the corrections. You can make things lighter, darker. So there's still a lot you can do with PNGs. So if you find it easier to work with PNGs all the way through, you can always do that. Okay, so that's done. So what are we going to do with this guy? Well, this guy has to go in the back. Okay, so it should probably go behind Sunflower 2. So we can see it's Bud 2. Let's put it behind our Sunflower 1. We should put it behind Sunflower 1. Let's drop it down there. And it's behind Sunflower 1. Looks pretty good. Now let's take this. Maybe we're going to flip that one too. And maybe rotate it. Now again, you can see the shadow. Got to fix that shadow. You got to remember that when you rotate them. So we're going to change the direction of the shadow. And we got to do the same one up here. So we got to send that one backwards. So let's see. That's Bud 3. So it has to go behind. Let's go underneath Sunflower 1 and drop it down. So we have something like that. So that's looking pretty good. So you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get these sunflowers to really kind of branch out. I don't want to look like they're all like they're really just stuffed right in there. I'm trying to make it look like a natural kind of arrangement that you'd really, really do. Now we got one more, and I guess this guy can just go like over there. And maybe I'll rotate him. And we're going to, let's see, put him behind, let's say Sunflower 1. And we have something like that. So we can maybe bring him in front. That looks pretty good. So we have a little bit of a crossover there. And I think that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll just drop this guy down a little bit. Okay, so we got nice little sunflower arrangement. I like them the way they're branching out. So they look like they're properly placed into the vase. Now I'm looking at this. Maybe I should make the vase a little bit wider because it should be a pretty big vase to incorporate all those in there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we're going to use our leaves. So the leaves are going to be used just to fill in all the kind of awkward little spaces we have here. So let's take the leaves, and we're going to probably need 4 or 5 of them. So what we're going to do is just duplicate some of our leaves. So we'll do that right now. So it's called leaf 1 like the other one. So we're going to call that leaf 2. And let's just make another one. And we're going to call that one leaf 3. And let's make another one. And we'll call that one leaf 4. There we go. Let's put some here underneath the sunflower. So let's rotate this. So let's take a look. This is Sunflower 2. This is leaf 4. So it needs to go underneath Sunflower 2. Just like that. So that looks pretty good. And I'm going to take this one. I'm going to kind of rotate it. And that has to go underneath Sunflower 2. And we're going to put it in kind of like this. So you can kind of see what we're doing here. We're just filling in all the kind of awkward spaces with leaves. That's their kind of function in this thing here. Let's take this one. Let's rotate that one. And that's going to go here. So it has to go behind Sunflower 1. So what is that one? That's leaf 2 behind Sunflower 1. And we got to put it in there. Let's take this one. It should probably go somewhere in here. And that one actually fits in there pretty good without doing anything to it. Okay, that looks pretty good. Gives us a little bit of depth. Slightly in front of this one, which is okay. Okay, now we got some of these to do. We have some of these folded ones to do, so let's take another one. We'll call that folded 2. Maybe and make another one. Call that one folded 3. So we're going to put some of these like in the background, kind of like that. I'm going to bring that a little bit up. Now you notice how this one is in front of that leaf, so I can't get it, right? So how am I going to get that? Well, I could go like this. I could select across, which would give it to me, but I could also do it through the selection pane too. Okay, so let's see, maybe I'm going to rotate that a bit. And I'll use my arrow keys just to move it up. So we got a leaf there. Now let's take another leaf. We'll put this one behind this one. Okay, so it's folded 2. That one's profile, folded 2, goes behind profile 2. And I kind of just do that. And we got one more, maybe we'll stick back there. Okay, so that's going to go there. I'm going to flip that one. I could actually even flip it vertically, have it going that way. Okay, so that has to go behind this guy here. So that's bud 2. Folded 3. That goes behind bud 2. And we can just drop that kind of maybe somewhere down like this. Okay, so now we just kind of look at the awkward spots. We got all this in here. It looks pretty good. They look kind of natural, like they were placed properly in there. And now we just got to move things around. So what do we think? Maybe I'll move that up here. I think what I'm going to do is flip this one around. I'm going to bring this one in. I'm going to bring this guy up here. So I'm going to take this one and just flip them around like this. We got little buds all kind of together. That looks pretty good. I think I like that. And what I'm going to do is take this leaf. I think what I'm going to see if I can get that leaf, which is folded 1, and I'm going to bring that a little more to the front. So maybe I'll put it under sunflower 1. And just so we have something a little bit like that. I think that looks better. So we have a little bit of leaf like that. I think what I'm going to do with that guy is rotate him, flip horizontally, and have him going the other way. So until you get this all in, you never really know exactly how they should work. But I think that looks good too. Okay, that looks pretty good too. And we'll just kind of drop that in there. Now you notice I never made the stem, the connector that goes from the leaf to the stem themselves. I never bothered with that because I knew you weren't going to see it anyway. So I never bothered with that. It looks pretty good. We've got some pretty good depth in here, so it looks like we got a lot of forward and backward positioning of all the things in here. So the next thing is we got to add some little drop shadows in here. Let me just move this a bit. Okay, so let's do our little drop shadows in here. This is going to be a very easy part. So we're actually going to just create regular drop shadows. Let's start off with the leaf. We'll show you how it's done with the leaf. So let's take this and we're going to just add a drop shadow. So we want the shadows going downward. So let's say I'll take a down one like this one. Okay, so there's your shadow. And what I want to do is move the distance. Okay, now obviously I don't want it on the background. So I'm going to try to change the angle, see which way it works. There it goes. So I want to keep this on the vase, and that looks pretty good. So I might lighten it, take the transparency up just a little bit, and that looks a little better. Now let's take this sunflower. Let's do a drop shadow on that one. So we're going to drop it down. Okay, we're going to take the distance. Now you can see it's coming off into the background. That's not good. So we can try changing the angle. See how that works? Okay. Now, it's still going in the background. We don't want that because that's going to flatten this. The vase is away from the background, so this shouldn't be in the background. So what we do is we take the size down like this, and then we move the distance. And then we can try changing the angle there. Changing the angle a bit. So we get something like that. I'm going to take the size down just a little bit. Take the distance. And just move it kind of like that. So I'm just trying to position it in there. That looks pretty good. So we got nice petal shadows in there. That looks pretty good. Let's take this leaf. Let's do a shadow on that one. So it's going to drop down. Again, we're going to move it. Kind of like that. Now, the shadows are going to go in the background. They shouldn't be a black. They should probably be a nice brown shadow like that. So more like that. That looks natural. You can see it's even going over the flower there, which is pretty nice. Now let's take this flower and we're going to put a shadow going down again. Looks pretty good. Let's move the distance down a bit. And we don't want to go off the slide. So let's change the angle a bit. Let's see if we can drop it down. And let's make that a nice brown shadow. That looks pretty good. Let's move it down a bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, now if the shadows are moving away from the object, they're going to look farther away from the background. That's kind of what I'm going for. Okay, let's take this one. And let's do the same thing. Drop it down. And we want maybe a brown shadow on that one. And let's move the distance. There you go. Make sure it's not in the background. That looks pretty good. Kind of like that. Let's take this one. Let's drop the shadow. Let's make it go down the distance. That looks pretty good. Change it to a nice brown. That's done. Maybe make it just a little bit darker. Change the angle if you want. Move it around. I think it looks pretty good like that. Take the distance, a little more distance, maybe drop it. I think that looks pretty nice. I like that. We can make it a little darker if you want. Let's take this flower and let's do the same thing. Let's drop it. Okay, let's make the color brown again. So we want a nice one like that. You can make the transparency down. Let's see, should we drop a little more? That looks pretty good. Looks quite realistic, but it should probably be towards the back. So let's change the angle. So probably a little more towards the back because the light's coming this way. Okay, let's move it that way. And we're going to do that. Maybe I'll take it down a bit, take the size down a bit. Let's take this one, put it down, distance, change the color. I think it looks pretty good. And you can maybe make it a little darker. And if you want to move it more, change the angle, drop it down. So lots of play here. We're trying to keep them all going kind of the same way. Obviously, they would be going mostly the same way. So let's click here. Let's drop it down. Let's give it a brown. Let's take the distance. That looks pretty good. I love how this shadows overlap. It looks more realistic when they do that. So that's why we got this overlapping bit in here. Let's click in here. Let's take that one. Shadow going down. Do the same thing. Let's make it brown. Let's do the distance. And let's change the angle a bit. We don't want it going off. And we have something like that. Okay, so you can see what the shadows do. The shadows just give it that extra dimension, make it look a little more realistic. Let's take this one. Let's take the leaf. And let's put a drop shadow on that one. Let's move that one. So it's going to cast just a little bit of a shadow. You're not going to see much of it. Let's take this leaf. Let's drop that one. Again, you probably won't see much. That looks pretty good. And that should be brown because it's casting on the background. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now let's take this one. Let's do a drop shadow on that one. Let's do the distance. And let's change the angle a little more like that. And that should probably be a brown. I'm going to drop it down like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now we have to do the vase. Now the vase is not going to have a drop shadow, because actually what would happen is the light would be coming through here. It would be casting more of a reflection rather than a shadow. So we want to do a reflection kind of on the wall and kind of on the shelf here. So what we're going to do is just duplicate the vase. Pretty easy. Let me just move some of this over. Now we don't need the stems. Let's get rid of that. Okay, let's squish this down. I'm going to flatten it out. I'm going to rotate it. And I'm going to do this one first. So we're going to just flatten this out. Like something like that. So we're going to call this Vase Reflection 1. So it has to go underneath the vase. So let's just drag that underneath the vase. Kind of like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our picture tools format, and let's see, color, a little more red. What we're going to do here is work on corrections here. So we can make it like really bright, or we can make it like really dark. I'm going to take that one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. Now remember, our vase is actually a vector that has a bitmap in it. So because it's a vector, well, we can go back here and change the transparency. So we take the transparency and we have something like that. So you can see what we have here of a nice reflection as it should be. And what I want to do, of course, is do the same thing for the background. So maybe I'll even take the same thing here. Rotate it. We're going to call it vase reflection number 2. And that has to go behind the vase also. So we get something a little bit like that. I'm going to just kind of rotate it a bit. What I'm going to do with that is I'm going to go here and we'll go to our fill here and we're going to make it a little bit transparent. Now I might make that one a little bit brighter. So let's go to here and let's see how that looks. So I'm going to just run my mouse pointer on this. So you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a reflection on the wall. And I think that's not too bad. I'm going to go to my effects here, and I think I'm going to do is a soft edge on that one. So I'm going to put a soft edge. Let's try 2.5. Let's try maybe 5. So we got a bit of a soft edge. We got a nice little reflection here. And that's kind of what happened with the light coming through there. We're kind of reflect on there. Same thing here. Maybe in this one I'll do the same thing. I'll put a soft edge on it. Maybe 2.5 or maybe a little higher. And we have a soft edge on that. So there it is, sunflowers in a vase. We hoped you enjoyed these series of tutorials. They were quite long, but I tried not to miss any steps. If there's something you didn't catch or something that you didn't quite understand, you can always try to leave a comment and I'll try to get back to you on that one. But I think it was pretty straightforward. So we followed our basic principles. We take simple shapes, turn them into complex looking objects, and then in these 3 videos we focused on creating realistic textures by using the picture tools. Often that's the only way to create an effect that you want, by using the picture tools. So the picture tools are something you just have to play with. There's no magic to how they work, but if you worked in programs like Photoshop and you worked with filters, you kind of got the idea how it works, so it's a little easier to do it that way. But if you've never done that, it's just something that you play with. And then, of course, the last thing we did is work with our nice selection pane, and we showed you how to use that to make complex looking projects like this much easier to work with by naming them and moving them up and down the stacking layer. Now, I use the selection pane all the time, even when I'm not creating complex things like this. I just find it a lot easier to work. What we're going to be doing next is replacing some of the sunflowers with different kinds of flowers. So if you like to create flowers in PowerPoint, you should watch those videos. Once again, we're going to take simple shapes, convert them into complex looking shapes, and use some PNG effects to give us some nice texture. So I hope to catch you in those videos, and we're going to watch this vase transform with different flowers. So thank you for watching, and we'll catch you on the next video.